Welcome to another episode of CloseMode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong, and today I'm really lucky to be here with Ben Timm, who's VP of SMB Sales with Daxko. And for folks who aren't familiar with Daxko, they provide tech solutions for non-for-profits that power health and wellness. Pretty cool company. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Brian, thanks so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
So you and I were chatting last week, and you made a comment to me about, and not to like make ourselves self-important, but it sounded like truth to me. You said sales leaders are very often among the most important people in reps' lives. And I just thought about, wow, that's a pretty kind of awesome responsibility. And we talked a little bit further. I like the emphasis you put on balancing, right? As sales leaders, we got to put pressure on people to meet quota. And then we also have to truly care about people. And you kind of mentioned servant leadership, which I hadn't heard in a while. And it was good to bring it back. But can you expand on this idea about the role we play as humans, as sales leaders with our reps?
Here's the way that I like to break this down, right? So old movie quote, right? There are 24 usable hours in every day, right? It's not 100% a fact, but 24 usable hours in a day. Average person spends 6 to 7, 8 hours a day sleeping. Okay, 40-hour work week. If they're working 40 hours, I know as a seller, I know all my sellers, they're pushing the limits on 40, 50, 60, depending on how hungry they are, right? So they're doing anywhere between 2,000 to 2,400 hours out of almost 9,000 hour year. So about between 22 to 26, 27% of their time is actively engaging in something that you are supervising. The way I look at this and why I think it's very important, right, is we are in charge of dictating and delegating 25% of our team members' lives. That's a huge responsibility. And if you look at it, like in the waking hours, that's a lot of them. So and I always go back and think about how I have been in my past lives and roles and responsibilities and this and that. Your boss is very important. If you've got a great boss, you wake up and you're like, man, I am excited. We're going to do some stuff. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a great day. If you loathe your boss, you wake up and you're like, ugh. When you like look at your computer, like, I don't even want to log in right now. You get out of a meeting, you walk around, you're like, what am I doing? You spend more time surfing LinkedIn than you do, actually working in your job.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important. And I don't like sales leadership, definitely leadership as a whole. To me, we are responsible for so much of our team members' time that if we can do anything we can to elevate that experience, that time, you don't see, nobody comes home from Disney World and talks about just how much they hate Disney, right? Like if they're having a good time, they're going to be happier in their job. They're going to do a better job. If I talk to one of my SDRs, BDRs, I'm like, hey man, when you make that phone call, like you got to have a smile on your face. If they absolutely hate their 9 to 5, it's really hard they got to force that smile. But if they're like, you know what, like I like what I do. I've got a boss who listens to me, like it's going to be easier for them to put that smile on their face. And now they're not having to fake it because they're just genuinely like, is it work? Yes. Would I rather sit on the beach? I don't like the beach personally, but would I rather go do something that isn't work? Sometimes, but I also like the problem solving of that. And I hope that we build that it's my responsibility to build that into my team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful, and especially when you put it that way. And I think we forget. And I think most people can go back and think about being out with friends, talking about, holy crap, like I hate this person, or they're driving me nuts. And then I go to the opposite. My wife has loved her last 2 bosses, and she had another company coming after her, and I talked to her about she's a data scientist, so she doesn't. Think about the notions of political capital. And that's what I tell them. Like, if you love your boss, dude, I don't care if it's 10 grand more. Like if you end up with someone who's a jerk. And I just think it's really good. There is the old notion, right? That people don't leave companies, they leave their boss.
That's right. Well, I actually would even go into people don't start looking, right? Because of pay or they start looking because of the culture, their boss, how they're directed. They leave because there's probably like there's that's that pull of is the grass greener,
Yeah.
Or you know what? If I don't like my boss now and I go there and I don't like that boss, but I'm making 10 grand more, like
Yeah.
I started making 10 grand more, I still
Yep.
don't like my
It's
boss.
it's it's been it's so powerful. I started after we talked about this last time. I started thinking about Steve Wise and Roger Dow, two of the last like bosses I had, and I remember Steve Wise. I worked for Marriott International. He was an SVP, so he was about two steps away from Bill Marriott, or an EVP actually. And I got a Christmas card from Steve once in his hand, and he called me Junior, and he said, "Junior, you're a large part of my success for this year," which I knew was bullshit, by the way. But this was 25 years ago or more, Ben, and
And you still
I
remember that.
remember this note. And so when you and I had this discussion last time, it sort of re-engaged this idea of it isn't overstated, because I remember to this day. And I even knew, I don't think it was true what he said to me, but it sure did feel good.
Yeah. And then like even here's like the other way I think about this is, as a person, as as a person in this world, like do I want to be the person who people remember me as like, man, that guy was an
Right.
asshole, right? Or do I want people to remember me of how I would prefer to be remembered, right? And I hope in the same situation that you have with Steve Wise, I hope that my team members think back 20 years from 20 years from
Yeah.
now, think back and be like, man, when I was working for like, like we had rough goes, we had things, but I always knew that Ben had my
Yes.
back, right? That's how I want to be remembered in things. So that's how I try to always act as if this is going to be how
Yeah,
I'm remembered.
it's yep,
So
super important. So I wonder too, just for our watchers, listeners, Ben was a gunner on helicopters in the Marine Corps. Did I get that right? And I wonder how much of is there any tie to the way you look at leadership and your Marine Corps experience?
yeah, I mean, it's first of all, like, so I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years. I mean, at this point, it's a quarter of my life, right? Like, I spent 25% of my life as an active duty Marine from '04 to '14, numerous deployments overseas, and I served with some of the finest young men and women of this country's ever seen. During that time, I got to experience a lot of different leadership styles. I got to experience what good leadership I think looks like. I got to see what bad leadership looks like. In the Marine Corps, you're not always promoted based on your abilities and stuff like that. Like we want to believe that always to be the
Right.
case, but in any situation, some people get through, right? So I got to experience good leaders, bad leaders, and it really started early for me crafting what I thought a good leader looked like. And I always think about how I would prefer to be led, right? And trying to be an level-headed, even, just even-keeled kind of person. I think that I am how I would like to be led. A lot of the things and lessons that I picked up on, some of them were like just generalized things that I learned. One of the things, and I use this as an example, I watched this scenario happen. We had a young Marine had been late kind of regularly, was, UA, like, hey, just he was late. One day he was late and he was a little more late than normal. And we're like, and this sergeant, I was a young Marine, the sergeant was like, where, what's his number? We get his number. He calls him, he answers the phone. And he's like, where? Yelling at him. And he's like, Sergeant, I'm super sorry. My wife was just in a car accident. She's in we're in the ambulance right now. In that right
Oh
there,
man.
I was like, and you see this guy go
Yes.
like, oh, like I messed up. So to this day, if something's wrong, is everything okay? If somebody's late, so if we're at an event, we're at a conference and somebody's supposed, hey, we're all going to be downstairs at 9 o'clock. At 9:03, hey, is everything okay? Yep, everything's fine. I'm just running a couple minutes. Like, cool, no big deal. I never want to be put in that
Yep.
situation where I'm the jerk, right? And that's something that I witnessed happened, and it has I mean, that will be part of who I am for the rest of
Yep.
my life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of leading with compassion in there. I mean, you can even do that in traffic. Like
Yeah,
my wife is a rager, and I would say it if she was sitting right here. And I often say to her, I'm like, maybe that woman's got a sick kid in the hospital somewhere. She's flying to get to the hospital or something. And so
right.
it's the same notion, which I think is good. You also talked a little bit about servant leadership, and yeah, I do remember the days of going through servant leadership training, and ever, I do remember sitting in a meeting once as a VP, and it was like, all right, so the people I reported to, they were my customers, right? I had to serve them. The sales team now, I needed to serve them as their servant leader, and I remember sitting in one of those sessions, raising my hand and saying, "Is anybody in this room? Am I your customer?" Because I feel like I'm a
Right.
servant to
Yeah.
everyone in the room.
Yeah.
But what's your sense of servant leadership?
It's because we were talking about this, and I wanted to think about this, right? And we talked about it a little bit, and I don't, and personally, leadership is different columns or different attributes. I believe that a solid leader needs to have certain things, right? You need to be the coach in times. You need to be the servant in sometimes. You need to be the kind of the ball buster from time
Right.
to time, right? Like there are all these different things that you need to be, and you can't just be like if you meet somebody who's 100% a servant leader, they're like, okay, I can see that. That's I've seen leaders that are like they talk about like, oh yeah, well, that's our mom, or oh yeah, that's our dad gonna come take care of us and this and that. I'm like, all right, there's a point where
Right.
it can be a little diminishing, but I think that the biggest thing is like, and you pointed out, like they're my customers, right? Like my ability is how I am gauged across the industry, the company, and all that is based on how my team
Yeah.
performs, right? My team wants to perform. My team wants to do a good job. My team wants to hit quota. There are either things that they need help with, they need coaching or things like that, or there are roadblocks that are stopping them from doing that. So, my job as their servant is what roadblocks can I remove for you, right? We have a daily stand up and I say, hey, any comments, questions, concerns? Is there anything getting in your way of being successful
Yep.
today? And if they're like, yeah, I'm having an issue with this department or this thing or this process, whatever, sweet. That is my laser focus. Like I'm going to attack that problem and either break through those walls, smooth out that roadblock, whatever it is, to make it easier for my team to be successful.
Yeah, it's such a difference between having been a rookie leader, quite frankly, and when I was a rookie leader, I often tell people I want to go back to the people who were my first direct reports, my RVPs, and apologize to them for the child I was emotionally. I'm not kidding because I was an auditor of activities. That
Okay.
which
Yeah.
isn't leadership in my mind. It's not servant leadership. And you,
It's not
yeah, but
fun.
you made that point about like if we have to audit someone's activities, that might be the wrong person because good salespeople, not even great, good salespeople, we're already beating ourselves up enough. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah. Right. I mean, listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you've never had a pit in your stomach when you're like, days away from the end of the quarter or the month or the year, you have a pit in your stomach and you're like, I have no idea what I'm going to do right now. I am 34% behind quota and I don't know what's going to happen, right? If you don't have that pit or you've never felt that angst, like you're not really in
Right.
sales, in my
Yeah.
opinion, right?
Yep.
That that's a
It's
motivator.
it's a tightrope. I back when I was leading a sales team for a hotel company, I was dating a woman who had a PhD in molecular biology, Dr. Tillman, and I made more money than Dr. Tillman. And she was
Mhm.
like, "What the hell?" And then after seeing what I did for a while, she was like, "I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
It's a tightrope. Like maybe not every
Yeah.
day, but certainly every quarter, and certainly every January 1 or whenever your fiscal year is. It's a
Yeah.
tightrope."
Well, and you tell people, like, yeah, and I talk to other teams and divisions and leaders in other areas of things that are outside of sales, and there's always that like, well, sales is like you guys get paid
Right.
a lot more. I'm like, it's a high
Yes.
risk, high reward. I was like, there's a reason. And my current CEO, Ron Lamb, I love to death. He's I don't think he coined it, but the only reason that smoke's coming out that chimney, right, at the business is because somebody sold
Right.
something,
Yeah.
right? And so you're like, I mean, that kind of puts it in
Yeah.
perspective. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't get someone else to adopt or buy that idea, like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Well, as they say too, revenue solves a lot of ills. So it cures a lot of ills,
Right?
so, without a doubt. But I wonder too, because and you kind of touched on this a little bit. So there is that need to drive people to hit the number, and then there is this servant leadership thing. How would you sort of hit the axis of both of those?
Yeah, it's a tightrope. To the point of like I I see this, I don't push on my team. We talk, "Hey, how's it going?" And I ask them, like I'm a very blunt person about how are things going? What do you think is either what's and I always ask, what's causing you to be successful? What is the differentiator between the top, you at the top, or our bottom performer? What's the differentiator there? And see if they can point it out. And if they're the bottom person, what is the differentiator? Hey, can you see what they're doing versus what you're doing? Is there a difference? I really try to avoid, I hear this a lot and I see this like, well, hey, let's get after it. Let's shake that tree. Let's let's really knuckle down. Let's dig
Right.
deep. And you're like, what are you even fucking talking about? Like, what do you think I've been doing? Like, there's a reason why I answer my phone at 9:30 at
Yeah.
night when somebody on the West Coast calls me because I'm trying to get the damn deal
Right.
done. Right. And so from a initial on my team, like I tell people who come to my team, like, listen, I'm not a micromanager. I do expect these things. I give a lot of leeway in how we do things. I expect performance. I will assist in any way I can to help you get to the performance levels that you need to be at and that I expect. But if you're not performing, like we're going to have conversations about it. So I lead with that. That is how I lead my team. I have never on day 25 of a month or the third last day of the quarter or the end of the year, I don't ever look at my team. I look at my team members, I'm like, what do you think you got left?
Right.
Right. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you think you're going to close? Like you're at 500 grand right now. Do you think you're going to get to 575? You got 3 days.
Yeah.
Can you do 25K in a day? And if they're like, I can do it, I'm like, sweet, show me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it. And if they're like, no, I don't know where else to turn, I'm like, okay, is this a moment that we can talk about and coach on what can we do? Right. Hey, what have you done? Cool. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you done this? Shit, have you got a sign and went on the corner and started spinning that mother? Like, what else can be done?
Right.
But I never force my team to inflate a forecast.
Yeah.
I never push them. What do you think you can hit? Because any salesperson, anybody who's carrying that bag is gonna know, like, if I'm like, hey man, I need you to do 500, and they're like, I only got 375. I'm like, okay, I need 500, and they're like, yep, I'm gonna get 375.
Yes.
Cool. I will go back and be like, yeah, we're gonna get 375 because I've built the trust with my team. That's what we're gonna hit. Like,
Yep.
I don't know what else to tell you.
It's funny. You make me think of a quick story I have to tell you. I was out to dinner. Those of us in selling might appreciate this, with an RVP and his sales team. I was doing consulting work with them. And he said, hey, I got to blow out of here. His company had just been bought. He's like, the new investors, I need to go have a meeting with them. But he said, I'll be back quickly. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, well, because there's a forecast number they want, and all the other RVPs are going to give him that and miss it. I'm going to give him the number that I know I can actually hit, and I'm going to be back here without a job. And it happened. He came back about an hour and a half later. He's like, buy me a drink. It's over. But I love the fact that he had the guts to walk in and say, this is a number I can hit. I know I can hit this number. And so, yeah. And so you said something early on here. There's so many, like, where's this deal? Where's this deal? What's happening? And I wrote down just this, how can I help? that alone, what obstacle can I get out of the way for you? How can I help get this deal done? Which is that's coaching versus auditing of where we at on this deal.
Yeah. I tried to never intersect myself, or I never want to interject myself into deals, especially when we're working these big, long sales cycles in some of our customers. I don't ever want to like, hey, like, do you need me to do anything? And sometimes they're like, I'll tell you what, man, if you could just come in and bring some weight, cool. A VP of sales walks into a deal. The customer knows that they've got some, hey, they brought the brass in a little bit, right? Like, cool, I'll bring in. What do you want me to say? What do you want me not to say? Do you want me to play bad cop or good cop? How can I help you get this deal done? And if they're like, hey, man, if you could just come in and just tell them it's going to be okay. I'm like, okay. I jumped on a call 2 weeks or a week ago. Yeah, last week on Thursday. I was literally like, hey, what's going on? I was like, jumped in and said, hey, can you just real quick tell me I just want to hear your experience, what's going on and what your concerns are. I know that he's told me, I've heard it from other people in the team. I want to know your concerns, talking to the customer. And they told me, I was like, yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. Here's the deal. I wouldn't be on this call if those concerns, right? Like you have legitimate concerns, if they were going to be a problem for us. I was like, these aren't going to be things, they're not things I'm concerned about. You shouldn't be concerned about. Here's how we're going to solve those things. I was like, what Tom has told you is 100% correct. We're going to keep moving forward in this and everything should be fine. Here's my email, my phone number. If you need anything, if you're unhappy, just let me know. Right. They're like, all right, cool. I was like, sweet. I'm going to let Tom take back over here. I was like, but I want you to know if like your concerns are heard, but you're going to be okay. We're going to take care of this. And they walk off and Tom Smith calls me like later. And he's like, man, that was the best. They came in, they're like, oh, that guy was so, and I'm like, all I did was say it was going to be okay. That's all I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope you've had a big impact in resurrecting some things that are important for me. And that's like, I want to close this thing out by, those of us in sales leadership positions, maybe we don't want to or maybe we sell ourselves a little short, or we don't want to be too self-important. But this thing that you said to me last week, and we repeated here today, that we may be one of the most impactful humans in a rep's lives, and we have to take that super seriously. And I would, any of us to think back to the good and the bad leaders we've had and the impact on the quality of our life. This is really, really important. And I don't hear about this enough, and really appreciate you bringing this to the table here today, because I think it's among the most important things we can think about as sales leaders.
The way that I heard this, and there's a way that I think about this, is do you want to be the reason somebody left sales, or do you want to be the reason somebody excelled in sales?
I love that. Yep.
Right. And it's like, man, like, I don't ever want to be the guy who's responsible for that guy going like, sales is the worst. I don't want to do this. I'm going back to whatever,
Yeah, but
people who don't sell.
But your style to me is it's also the opposite of fake motivation. It's helpful. It's how can I help you? What can I do for you? How can I remove obstacles? Because that's the other. We beat people up, or we come in with our rah-rah bullcrap. And I love this kind of middle level of, I'm here to facilitate and help you get stuff done. And it's really cool. And I think it's most of us probably know this. For me, it was a great reinforcement as a leader to say, yeah, I wonder how people feel about that. So thank you. You're super generous with your time, your ideas, and your energy. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. I have loved this. I've super enjoyed listening, and I am excited to see and hear more from CloseMode.
Thank you. Boom.